Hello there.
Dialogue, networking inspired.
And how about DNA?
Dialogue, networking inspired.
And how about DNA?
Dialogue, networking inspired.
And how about DNA?
With Nikke. With Nikke. With Nikke.
Good Saturday morning. Hello. This is me, Nikke, and thank you for joining me with Empowered by DNA Dialogue Networking Aspire. Listen, I'm in the Big Apple, New York. Yes, I'm in Times Square, but as I told you before, where I go, you go. We're on this journey together. And so this morning, we are coming live to you, and I have a very special guest I'm so excited about. It is actually my oldest daughter, Leah Hampton, Esquire. As a mom, we got to throw that in. And this morning, we're going to have some great conversation from a millennial perspective. I think it's important to look at it from not just the Gen Z, but the millennial. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our different generations, our thought process, politics, career, stuff like that. I think she's got some good information to share. And so I do invite you to share. Also, I can see the comments. So I definitely want to get your feedback, some good chatting going on. And so good morning, Leah.
Hey, Mama.
Thank you so much for joining me this morning on Empowered by DNA. And so just again, want to have a quick conversation this morning, looking from your generation's perspective on different things. And I always say your thought process is a bit different from ours, even down to like careers and parenting and things like that. So can you tell us I always ask every guest that joins one fun fact about yourself?
I don't really know. I guess fun fact about me is, well, I'm learning to play tennis. That's
Awesome.
fun fact
Okay, we're
about
learning to
me.
play tennis, learning something new.
Yes.
Awesome. And so as we have people joining and watching us this morning, what would you say is one of the biggest differences between the Gen Z and the millennial?
Well, I think when you break down the two, 'cause I think a lot of people in your generation get us mixed up and they speak about Gen Z and millennials like intertwined. So, to be specific, millennials are those who were born in the 90s. I think the last of a millennial is 99. Where Gen Z, they start in 2000. And I think for a lot of the millennials, we were raised with our grandparents, or at least with our grandparents kind of having a force in our lives. I think a lot of millennials, not me, but like a lot of millennials, they were raised in the home with their grandparents. So they picked up a workers like a work ethic of boomers or Gen X, where I think a lot of the Gen Zs, they were raised by Gen X mostly. And I think Generation X, that's when you start seeing more mothers working out of the home. And my boss and I were talking about the other day, because she said, she's Gen X, she has a Gen Z, and she said at some point she had to stop and check herself, because she felt like, oh, because I feel guilty about working, I'm giving her things. They're the generation of the participation trophies, and oh, as long as you try, that's it. Or everyone wants to hear what you have to say. And I think that they've been babied a lot, and how it translates to the workspace is that they feel like they should still be babied.
Wow, awesome.
Hmm.
Okay, yeah, I see the difference there. I definitely see the difference there. So when we look at the millennial perspective, and I mean, we won't get too deep into the politics. Although I believe um, that. I know who I'm voting for. I put it like that. But when it comes to politics, to voting, to um, I guess the really getting into understanding politics, voting, being from federal, local, state, like really getting involved. Where do you see the differences there in our generations?
I think that Gen Z gets most of their information from TikTok, which is skewed.
Mhm.
And they kind of get their talking points based off whatever's popular in that realm. I'm not going to generalize them and say all of them, but a lot of them. And I think that for millennials, we're the actual, new young adults. Most of us are, hitting 30 or 30 plus. We're the generation that's out buying houses and having to, deal with the large interest rates, and inflation prices are really hitting us. We're the ones that are generally married with kids. So we have the child care, while Gen Z is still, fresh out of college. They're just looking for their first jobs. They haven't really stepped in the market. So for them, it's kind of like, oh, well, voting doesn't matter, or it's no difference. But they're not actually feeling it, because for most of them, they're still, being provided for by their parents, who probably do feel like, there are issues. Whereas I feel like millennials, we're pretty much, our foot is in the economy. So we are being hit the hardest, I feel like, with inflation, with all of that, because the American dream, isn't there. Our grandparents or even parents were able to buy reasonable homes, and now being able to sell them for millions of dollars, where, honestly, if you don't make a certain amount of money, you're not being able to buy a house. Back in the day, you probably only needed 50, $60,000 to buy a house. That's not the case now. It's just not. You have to actually be able to afford a significant mortgage with the interest rates.
Awesome. Thank you. And speaking of the millennial, your generation being I guess, the new young adults, or where we were 20 years ago or more, let's move into the church.
Mm-hmm.
So you're now where we used to be, where you're the family, you're the economy, if you will, of the church. How do what's the different perspective there between Gen X, Millennial, Gen Z, where it comes to, if I said, what are you looking for in a church home? Like what do you think the differences are there? Because I agree with you. I think Gen Z is very much TikTok oriented.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too, it's like, due to TikTok and the fact that we're able to get information so quickly, sitting 2 hours, 3 hours, listening to a sermon. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but we just don't have the time. A lot of millennials, they are working 2 and 3 jobs just because of the economy. So to be able to carve out 2 to 3 hours on a Sunday when they're dead tired is just not realistic. I do think that, church is definitely important. Having God in your life is important, but so is eating and being able to feed your family. So I think a lot of millennials are having to weigh that out. And I think that, where people don't think that the economy is that big of a deal, or, oh, inflation's not that serious. It's a lot of people out here that are severely affected, and it affects things even as church, or even the fact that, you have a lot of people in churches now who should not be pastoring. A lot of people believe that pastoring is something, or ministering is something that should be passed down through generations. And I'm not I'm not an advocate of that. My dad's a pastor, and I mean, unfortunately, I guess for him, we're that's not a calling that I've had, or at least now it's not a calling that I've had. So I mean, you see a lot of mess in churches now, where I'm not saying that there wasn't messes then, but I do believe that other generations were willing to deal with a lot more because they liked the church, because they loved church, because they loved the people in the church. Where millennials and Gen Zs are like, but the leader is messed up, right? So I think the focuses are different. And then when you find a good church, sometimes I mean, I do believe that tithes is important, but you can't tithe the people to death, especially um in the economy we're in. I mean, for me, I consider myself to be pretty comfortable. But if I go to a church and they take in 5 or 6 offerings, babe, I'm a bold person. I'm gonna get up and leave on the third one. That's just, I mean, I think some things are ridiculous. And you know, as working people who have a families to take care of, I don't think it's the job of the people to pay for that Range Rover that the preacher wants to drive, or what have you. Now, a comfortable living or a salary has been decided. That's one thing, but when you are tithe and offering everyone to death, I think that that's also which I've seen from a lot of churches. Because myself, I'm in Atlanta. I've been going to you and Daddy's church forever, so that's been an experience for me and my family, having to find a church. And it's been 5 years, and it's been a lot of mess that I've seen that I don't agree with. So and that's the other thing. If you've been raised in church, in a church that was full of good people, and the pastor, and everybody was good, it's really hard to then find a church afterwards, because there aren't a lot of good people preaching. I don't know
Wow.
how to say that, but yeah.
Well, you said it. Wow. Well, we got Kevin Corporan on there. He said, yeah. He said we be like, gone. This ain't it, Doc. So definitely seeing the differences of, I think, in my opinion, our generation, to your point, is very loyal, right?
Hmm.
We've been here, we grew up here, so mom and daddy went, so we're not going.
Hmm.
Whereas what I hear you saying as a millennial, you're
We're like,
you're
what
you're
have you
holding
done for us
everybody
lately?
accountable. Say that
That's
again.
I said, if I had to give a quote, it's, what have you done for us lately? That's Gen Z and millennials, right? So, and it's one thing if you're tied into a church and then you fall on hard times and that church can give back to you. But I've seen a lot of people, a lot of older people, they've given a lot to churches, and when it came down to it, then people didn't even come and preach at their funeral.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
think you're looking at the millennials who are watching those pastors do that to their grandparents or their great aunts, and it's a turn off to the church. If I watch grandma pay her tithes when she didn't have nothing, still paid tithes to your church, and she died, and you can't even come and preach at the funeral, I'm not going to that church. And it's gonna put a bad taste in my mouth about church. So I do think that for millennials, it might be a lot of church bitterness, where Gen Zs are probably more, um, it's the time frame thing.
Awesome. So yeah, your generation, especially the leader, accountable, and you're saying, listen, I'm listening, I'm watching. So it's not loyalty here. Like I don't care. I even believe as your parents, if we were not
Well, it's not
walking the
blind loyalty. I don't want to say it's not loyalty,
right,
because
okay,
I
blind
do know a
loyalty.
lot of millennials who have found a church. They are loyal to the church. The church is a good church, but blind loyalty, no. I'm not going to watch you have 10 affairs through the congregation and still go to your church. That don't make no sense. No.
Okay, got it. Blind loyalty. Your dad said he might preach, what have you done for us lately? And
That's gonna
Kevin
be
said,
copyrighted. I'm gonna need my coins, all of them.
and Kevin said, as a millennial, yes, it's like you have to show by action, not just words. You all definitely hold the church accountable. So let's dive into family real quick, because we've got like 5 minutes left. So when we talk about family and the rearing of kids, I know you mentioned most millennials, or a lot of millennials, were raised by a village, either their grandparents solely, aunt and uncle, or mom, dad, grandparents, aunties, everybody. and I think you said Z may have been raised by their actual parents and sometimes younger
Well,
parents.
I don't. I think it's a mixture of Gen Z when how
Okay.
they're raised, because I think some of them are, honestly, a lot of them have younger parents,
Uh huh.
but the other half of them, if they are, typically if they're in a married household, they're Gen X, and Gen X is the first kind of generation, which is like your generation, where
Right.
you know, the mom has a job, dad has a job. So then, they feel bad and they start, questioning, are they doing enough, and, giving them everything. And the example I use was my boss, because she was saying, one day her daughter was in, some out of the country or something, and she was sitting at the office like, she's over here living the best her best life. I'm the dumb one. I'm the one sitting here financing it. But yeah, I think with Gen Z, they're not held accountable as much as I feel like millennials were held accountable to certain things. Like in my generation, you didn't get a participation trophy. If you lost, you lost, and you had to sit with that and work through that, which I feel like is important. Like even with, my child now, me and Rob, I mean, whatever, they were probably mean, but they tried to give Penny a participation trophy for a soccer game. I said, she ain't taking that. She lost. And she need to be okay with it.
Right.
Sometimes in life you're going to lose. If you're being told all the time, oh, you're going to win, life's going to be great all the time and every day, you're going to be very disappointed. And that's why so many of them are depressed and have mental health issues and have to take a minute. And it's because they've been told their whole life that they're going to be great and everything's going to be perfect. And now that that's not what's happening, they don't know how to function.
I agree. I agree. That was some good stuff, Leah. Yes, we have to help our kids understand it's okay. You lose some, you win some. And you're right. I think that those are definitely some important differences as we're seeing in the market in the working market today. Work ethic is different, strange for some. The entitlement, which comes from that. I'm just going to keep giving to you. Hey, you gave it your best shot. There's your big trophy. And so definitely this has been some great conversation, and I am excited about Empowered by DNA. Thank you so much, Leah, for taking some time out of the day to share with us the millennial perspective. Definitely want to get some more millennials in conversation, because I think it's important to understand your viewpoints, how to communicate with you, how to minister to you. And it's important for the next generation coming up behind you to grab some of that good stuff that you all have to share. So before we close, I ask every guest every time, if you could give a great piece of advice to one person, what would that be?
In respect to what?
I'm sorry, in respect to I'm gonna say in this instance, in respect to career growth, what would be one piece of advice you would give somebody?
I feel like you need to be teachable. You need to know how to play the game in corporate America and understand that, I mean, because Gen Z, most of the world is still ran by boomers. Let's just be real. And Gen Z is, for the most part, they don't want to work. And I told my nephew this the other day. All you have to do in this generation is show up and be willing to work, and that's already going to set you apart. Because I can tell you right now, as a manager at my firm, you know, people call in every day. I don't know how people are making money now. I don't know what people are doing, but people don't show up to work. They don't show up. They don't, and when they do show up, they want to half do the job and then be mad at you because you corrected them. If you show up to work every day and work hardest and listen and just follow the directions that you're given, you're going to excel, because that's not the market right now.
Right.
So that's going to set you apart.
Awesome. We've got one question in the chat and then we're going to end. I would like to know your political perspective climate at this moment.
My political perspective in today's climate.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, uh, I was just having this conversation with my Gen Z nephew who feels like it doesn't matter, whether you vote or not. But as I said earlier, for millennials specifically, we are the adults. And looking at everything, I mean, we have a lot of issues that we're facing that and issues that are back on the board, right? We have affirmative action being let go, which in retrospect for some people may not be a big deal, but for others, you know that was the way that at least for the committees, they could say, oh, okay, well, we have to do this, right? Now they don't have to, you know, looking at medical decisions. And, sometimes people hear abortion and they're like, oh, it's just, some clinic where someone goes because they don't want a baby, which is fine if that's their decision. But abortion also means it's for the woman who's having a miscarriage. They're not doing DNCs in Georgia, they're letting them sit in the car until they become sepsis because they have banned abortion. And so at that point, you're making a decision that now you're killing the mother and the baby
Wow.
because of some radicals. And that's the thing. So people hear abortion and they think, oh, well, I think that, and that's great if you think that all babies should be born, but you never know what someone needs and you never know what you need until you need it. Right.
Right.
You're essentially forcing women to be in this handmaiden's tale, what I say, when, they don't have to.
Right.
And so to me personally, as someone in a childbearing age, that's important to me. I live in Georgia. So for me, if I decide to have another baby, if everything doesn't go perfect, I could die.
Wow.
And I mean, for me and my husband, we talk about this all the time. We vote against our financial interests technically, because although, being a Republican would save us some money in taxes, they're not good people. Nothing else in that party for me personally supports the things that I need to do as a Black woman in America. It just doesn't. Nothing else supports me. So that's for us. We are a Democratic family due to we vote on the issues. And right now, for me, like I said, as a 33-year-old Black professional woman living in the South, having the ability to make medical decisions for myself is important. As well as, I mean, inflation. I don't know about other cities, but Atlanta is getting crazy. Like you used to, when me and my husband first moved to Atlanta, we were able to rent a 1 bedroom apartment for $700 a month. And that was a nice apartment, right? So I spoke to one of my clients and I was looking at her address the other day. I was like, "Oh, I used to live there." And she asked me, "How much did you pay?" And I was like, "Oh, we paid like $750 a month and that was high for us." She said, "What? That same apartment now is $3,000 a month."
Oh no.
And we moved to Atlanta in 2016.
Wow.
Yeah. We moved, no, 2017. That's when I got to law school. So we moved to Atlanta in 2017. It's 2024. And yeah,
That's a
it's a
huge
huge
inflated.
jump for a 1 bedroom. And this wasn't in the city or anything like that. This is in Stockbridge,
Wow.
which is further south. So I mean, even where we lived in Griffin,
Mhm.
that was like 600 a month for us. I
Right.
had a client there. She said that place we lived at was $2,500 a month. And
Wow.
it wasn't worth no $2,500 a month.
Wow.
So I I say all that to say that these are the real issues that we're facing. Housing, even going to the grocery store. I feel like I say I'm very blessed that, we've never had to go without, but for a week of groceries, in the metro area, we're looking at about $300 to $500 a week. This is a week, $300 to $500 a week, because I have a grown man and well, two grown men that live in my house, and then Penny and her snacks. But
Mhm.
all of that's expensive. I mean, luckily
Yeah.
for me, we can afford it, but there are people who can't. I mean, it's the economy is getting really bad. So I really feel like we need a president, someone capable and not a child,
Right.
you know. And I get, Kamala of course has issues like anyone else, but I think that for the most part she cares about this country and she wants better for not just everyone but for us.
Right.
She's lived her life going to an HBCU, joining an African American sorority, which I can relate to, being a professional woman. And, I think that I I hope to see her in the office because I will be at the inauguration if she is.
All right. All right. Well, all right. Well, thank you all so much. I know we got questions after questions, but what we will
We
do
can
is
answer
maybe.
the questions if you want to,
Oh, you want
Mom.
to go? Yes. Well,
Yeah.
there's a how do you deal with systemic racism in the Sonya Massey's case?
Me and my husband watched that video, and he's in law enforcement, and he was so mad. He's just like, that guy had there was no threat. that's the that's the point. There was no threat there. There was no threat. It's one thing if you have a gun, you run at the police with a knife. I get that. Those are people too who have families that they want to go home to. I got that. But when you don't have anything, when you just kicking down people's doors, no real warrants, you just going in, or she just had some water. Even if she threw the hot water on you, it wasn't going to kill you.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. But systemic racism isn't going anywhere. So I think as millennials, as Gen Zs, whoever, you have to be able to navigate the workspace with that. For me, I mean, I live in Atlanta, and Atlanta is a very different place. Um, I will say that it's not a lot of at least blatant racism in Atlanta. You will see a lot of African American people in high positions there because it's a lot of African American people moving through the city. So Atlanta is a bit different. I'm sure DC is something like that, but someone who grew up in the South, you just have to learn how to navigate systemic racism and understand that it's not going anywhere, and there's nothing that you're going to be able to say or do that's going to change their mind, and you're gonna have to just work through that.
Exactly. Yeah, and I agree. Even I mean, in all of the social injustices that we've seen,
Hmm.
even prior to the with Massey, I mean, you think about how many mothers have had to bury their children in just the last few years because of racism. I mean, cops who literally had no reason to do what they did. They were, and then the thing that I keep noticing is we keep recycling, if you will. That particular cop had moved from place to place, with
Hmm.
no, accountability. So I definitely think that that's why, if you ask me, you need to vote. And like you, I've talked to people who I don't see why I need to vote, and I tell people this is why you need to vote, because how we handle, even when you look at the judicial system, how we're handling these cases, I think that who's president, who's governor, who's senator, who's congressman, all these things matter, down to your mayor. All of this stuff matters. So thank you so much, Leah, for taking some time out and talking to us. Listen, this has been a really good conversation and a needed one, right? To look at different perspectives, but not only the millennial, the Gen X, the Gen Z perspective, but just the world in itself, and all that is going on. Inflation. We've talked about parenting. We've talked about religion or Christianity. We've and what the church, we as a body of Christ, need to focus on as well. And so I just really appreciate your um, um, willingness to come and talk to me today. And I thank you all for the chat. This has been really good. I've got a lot of comments out here. Um, Kevin said the math is not mathing. So definitely been some great conversation here. So thank you again for joining me this morning on Empowered by DNA. Dialogue, networking, aspire. And I think this dialogue this morning is much needed. So listen, if you're not registered to vote, I need you to get registered to vote today. Monday, Tuesday, whenever you can get there. Change your license. Make sure you are ready to vote. And listen, do not stop at the presidential election. I need you to vote every time you get an opportunity. Our ancestors fought, walked, marched, died for our right to vote. And so we want to utilize that. So again, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Empowered by DNA. Look forward to seeing you next Saturday at 9 a.m. And so for now, I'll say goodbye. See you later. Look forward to talking with you again. Bye. Hello there.
Dialogue, Nikke.
we done?